welcome to the third episode, or another long-awaited episode of the Brewed Palate in the Kitchen. This time, as you see there in the title, is going to be beer braised lamb shanks. Now, I haven't cooked lamb shanks before, but I know that a good way to cook gamey meats like this is through braising or cooking in liquid. So, since I have done plenty of braising before, I thought I'd get some lamb shanks, because I love lamb, and cook them with a Belgian beer, because Belgian beers tend to go really well with savory, gamey meats like lamb, duck, and stuff like that. So the beer that I chose is one of my go-to Belgian beers, especially from New York State, is the Ommegang Three Philosophers Quadruple, which is actually brewed with cherries. So, so I thought that, the cherry would add some sweetness and depth to the dish. And in order to accent those cherries, or just overall dark fruitiness that I love from this beer, I got some fresh organic rosemary. I'm not going to use this much, obviously, because a little bit goes a long way. So I'll probably use maybe half a sprig, and then add more if to taste, but usually a little bit goes a long way, as I said, from experience. So I'm going to go ahead, as in past episodes, and show you the ingredients, both the seasoning and the vegetable portion, or the mirepoix, if we want to use fancy cooking terms, and then I'll be back as I prep my beer braised lamb shanks. So let's go along. Cheers. Here we have the prep stage, and you see here I'm prepping the mirepoix, or aromatic vegetables, that almost served as a side dish to go with the lamb shanks. So I have my carrot, celery, onion, all of which are receiving a nice rough chop, because I want to eat them alongside the lamb shanks. Now you could add other vegetables, but I just decided to go for a basic mirepoix, and then add some big chunks of garlic and some portobellos, which I ended up buying pre-sliced portobello caps, but kept them big because my wife and I both like mushrooms. And then, after all the vegetables were chopped up, I took a little bit of flour to create almost a seasoned flour dredge for the lamb shanks, because the flour helps thicken the sauce and helps brown the meat a little quicker. So as you see here, I'm adding a little bit of each of the seasonings that I listed in the ingredients part to it and mixing it up. Then, as I said before, browning the meat or searing it, I rolled each lamb shank in the seasoned flour and then transferred it to the French oven or Dutch oven, which was already heating up with a little bit of olive oil. And you want to brown it, 2 to 3 minutes, maybe a little longer on each side, just to, get a nice little brown crust. There is a lot of fat usually on lamb shanks, and these two were pretty fatty, so I needed to sear them a little extra just to make sure that some of the fat started to render and that it would seal in those juices. Then, I added a touch of oil, just to accommodate all the veggies, and started sauteing the veggies. And one trick that I use to help things reduce is I put the lid on after I put in all the mirepoix to start, and once it cooks a little, then I could remove the lid, stir it around, and add the garlic and mushrooms, which are softer and have a bigger risk of burning if they're left with the oil for too long. So just put everything in, and stir it every once in a while to keep everything from burning. Then, to deglaze, open up the bottle of Three Philosophers from Ommegang, as I showed you before, just to deglaze the French oven, and you know, at that point I shut off the flame just so I can, you know, deglaze it without having the beer heat up just yet. I wanted the beer really just to clean off the bottom, stop the oil from getting any hotter, and I just poured in a little bit at a time just to make sure I can meter out the beer instead of dumping half the bottle in and not being able to see how much to fill up after I added in the chicken stock. So just pour some in and use whatever kitchen implement you're using. I'm using tongs to scrape around the pan. Now once you've kind of deglazed the bottom of the pan, put both lamb shanks in and pour just about 2 cups worth of chicken stock. This is just to, you know, round out all the flavors, bring everything together. You want to use chicken stock and not beef stock because the lamb has a very subtle, nice flavor, and you don't want beef stock to get in the way. And at this point, I added the bay leaves and the rosemary. I used about half a sprig, maybe a little more, broken in half, just to, you know, get on both sides of the pot, and added a little bit more of basically all the seasonings that I did before, just because, of course, I didn't use most of the dredge with the flour, so I needed to make sure that, you know, all that flavor that I wanted to get out of the spices was still going to be present in the final dish. And then, as I said, then I was able to know how much more beer to add, and just topped it off. It doesn't need to be totally covered because you can check on it, you know, throughout the braising process and know how it's doing and flip the shanks if you need to. And once you have all the beer in, you can pour yourself the last little yeast shot in order to make, because I just didn't want to pour the yeast in, and of course I wanted to taste some of the beer for myself. And then it's time to, of course, set your oven to 280. If I set it lower if you want to cook, you know, a little lower and slower, but I knew that I wanted to do it for a little over 2 hours, so I made sure to set it to 280, put it in the oven, and let it go. Alright guys, so as you see, the prep part of the beer braised lamb shanks is done. Of course, I took the last little bit with the yeast because I didn't want to put the yeast into the French oven or Dutch oven. So just a little bit about the beer. This bottle was bottled on April 29th of this year, so it's about, you know, less than 6 months old. So it's pretty fresh for a 9.7% quad with cherries, and as a quick aroma and taste, it has a lot of dark fruit. You could definitely smell like the slightly tart cherry part to it. So it's not as mellowed out as some aged versions that I've tried, but it'll definitely go with the seasonings that I put in, you know, which are a combination of, as I said in the beginning, you know, of stuff that goes well with lamb and stuff that goes well with the beer. So the bay leaves and the rosemary go well with the beer, and all the rest of the spices go well with lamb. So once it's ready, after cooking about a couple hours at 280, or low and slow at 280, then I'll come back and show you what the final product looks like. Cheers.